Hello Year 11 and welcome back to Miss G Drama. This is the final session for Section B Noughts and Crosses, and it will be focusing on question 9.4, the 20-mark question. So this session will focus on the specification criteria for question 9.4, using precise details, linking ideas to the play as a whole, and then structuring a response. So what will 9.4 ask you to do? The question will ask you to interpret a character and explain how you would use your acting skills to perform them. Then it will ask you to explain why your ideas are appropriate to the play as a whole. So it's the fourth question of section B and it's worth 20 marks. So if you look below, there is a screenshot taken from the actual exam from last year. So the last year 11 cohort sat this, and it says you are performing the role of Callum. Describe how you would use your acting skills to interpret Callum's character, explain why your ideas were appropriate for this extract and the performance of your role in the play as a whole. So if we look at the specification criteria, there are a lot of things that mirror other kind of criteria from other sections and questions. But if we look to the right-hand side, we're looking for excellent knowledge of how drama is created and performed, exact and appropriate to the focus, and using precise details. So with precise details in mind, here are some showcase sentences which we have looked at in another video, so please go and look at that if you haven't had a chance to. And what it shows you on the left is the more simplistic use of details, and then on the right it shows you an example of a precise detail and how you should be, using very targeted vocabulary to make sure you are describing the acting on stage to give it a picture to the examiner of how it would look. Some students find it incredibly difficult to link their ideas to the play as a whole. So here are some examples of how you might do it. So for each of them, you obviously need to create an interpretation for the extract. On the blue one, it says to find another moment in the play where the character shows these traits or similar traits. So that's a very simple way that you can link a paragraph from the extract to the play as a whole, because you're finding another moment where the character behaves in that way. However, you might also consider how far the character has developed and a contrast for that character, because inevitably in life, characters will behave differently, things will happen, and that will make them behave differently. So that's something to consider as well when you're linking your ideas to the play as a whole. And finally, you might also consider what has led the character to behave in this way. Say you're given an extract that's near the end of the play, for example, and the character has developed quite a bit. You might want to go back and think about why it is that they are now behaving that way. So, for example, Callum in The Hideaway is behaving incredibly different from the first act when he's kind of getting to know Seffi, he has a close bond with her, and then in the final scene he's quite violent and sharp with her. So you have to think about why that is. Could it be due to the fact that he's lost his sister, he's had so much trauma happen to him, he wants justice? These are the kind of things that you need to think about when also linking your ideas to the play as a whole. So here are some sentence starters that can help. But if you look to the bottom, there is a part that says more sophisticated links to the play as a whole. And you can think about the sentences you might use to make those links. And we're going to focus on the bottom one to see how we can get around this idea of character development. So it tells you to insert a character, because obviously I'm not going to pinpoint it to anyone for the sake of it being a kind of sentence starter. So the character's behaviour in this scene shows how far this character has developed, probably due to the fact that she has faced constant discrimination throughout the play, making this the boiling point for her as a character, for example, and then you would go on to explain why that is appropriate. So that's an example of how you can link together sentences with your paragraph on the extract and then making the link to the play as a whole. Something that I think is a really useful revision technique is going through the play and familiarising yourself of the key characters and how they behave throughout it. That means that when you go into that exam, you're going to have all the knowledge you need of the character, and when it comes to making your interpretations, you'll know the key moments for that character. So if we look, for example, at Seffi, in the first scene she might be quite naive. How comes I never come to your house anymore? Aren't I welcome? She says that to Callum on the beach. But at the end, really, Seffi goes on quite a journey. She shows how she's quite resilient and how she has kind of gone on a journey, and despite the fact that she's being treated quite badly in the hideaway, that she's prepared to stand up for what she believes in. So that would be an example of how a character is kind of developed throughout the play. What I'm going to do is go through each of these slides, and if you want to pause and have a look at some of the key quotes and interpretive words, then you can do that. So we've got Seffi and Jasmine. We've got Callum and Meggie. We've got Kamal and Ryan. We've got Minerva and Jude. And now we're going to move on to the structure. So as always with structure, use what you think is appropriate, because often you'll find that your ideas will go in a very kind of different order depending on how much detail you're doing and your analysis, etc. But here's one called I See Mill. So we have your introduction, idea and context, a moment from the extract or play, explaining the skills you would use with precise details, analysing the deeper meaning and the effects, and then linking your interpretation to the play as a whole. So it's just a way to remember all the things you need to include. I find it easiest to structure this response by talking about the extract first and my interpretations, and then straight away writing a paragraph linking it to the play as a whole. I find that if students leave this to the last minute and leave the play as a whole to the last minute, it seems like more of an add-on than a real interpretation and a really meaningful link. So I would recommend embedding that throughout your response. So we have a practice question here that we're going to do, and it is for Meggie. So it says, explain how you would use your acting skills to interpret Meggie as a character, and explain why your interpretations are appropriate for this extract and a play as a whole. And if you want to look at the scene it's on page 57 to 58, that's the extract we're focusing on, and the lines are there. I do apologise, but for this question it should say describe how you would use your acting skills. So let's just bear that in mind as we go through the model. So we're going to read through the model, and as always you can flick back and forth to think about which parts are the precise details, which are the links to the play as a whole, the context, etc. So we're looking at Meggie McGregor. And it says, Meggie McGregor is Callum's mum, a Nought in the play, who has endured years of oppression and discrimination at the hands of crosses. Meggie has to hold together her family while she experiences extreme trauma, but always tries to maintain a strong exterior for the sake of her family. In this extract, Meggie is seen to be frustrated and vulnerable because despite her best attempts to protect her family, Ryan and June have gone against her will. When delivering the lines, someone better tell me what's going on, I would use loud projection and put emphasis on the word better with sharp diction to almost spit the word out. This would highlight Meggie's sheer frustration at being in the dark when she knows something terrible might have occurred. My physicality would also display Meggie's frustration. I would glare between Ryan and Jude using direct eye contact and a straight posture to show that Meggie is trying to assert her authority. However, despite this exterior, Meggie feels a complete lack of control at this moment, so my gestures would indicate my vulnerability, with my hand trembling by my side and my lip quivering as I delivered the words. So we can see here that there's a short introduction which links to context to make it slightly more sophisticated. But with this response, there are a few interpretations in that paragraph, because it's thinking about how the character is showing herself to other characters, but then how she's feeling inside, so the hidden layers of her character, which I think is what makes this kind of response more sophisticated. So now I make the link to the play as a whole for that paragraph. So Meggie's frustration and vulnerability is shown in other moments of the play, such as Act 1, Scene 17, making this interpretation appropriate for the extract and play as a whole. More specifically, when her and Ryan are arguing over Lynette's death. Their relationship is turbulent and their marriage breaks down over the course of the play. Meggie says the line, "Then we have nothing to say to each other." I would say these words using a very slow pace but with some hesitancy, because I know how serious the statement is. I would divert my gaze to the side, avoiding eye contact with Ryan, because Meggie has lost all connection with her husband and doesn't know how to solve their marital issues. So I've made the link because I'm talking about the breakdown of the marriage, and that's quite similar to the previous paragraph where we've looked at her frustration with the family and how difficult she's finding her connection with them. Now for the extract paragraph 2, we've got Meggie also shows her moral and sympathetic side as the news is delivered to her as she finds out about the brutal attacks at the shopping centre. Meggie shows that her beliefs are very distant from Ryan's because the last thing she would do is resort to violence. When delivering the line, "You killed, you murdered all those people," I would say this line in a soft, quiet tone and pause after saying "you killed" to show how Meggie can't even utter the words due to the disgraceful act committed. I would also draw out the word murdered to try and show the other characters the significance of what they have done. I would have wide eyes to show my sheer shock at their act of violence, which is so far from my own values for solving the divide between noughts and crosses. So here we're showing a different interpretation of Meggie. We're thinking about how, in the situation when this has happened, she's really feeling for the people that have been hurt in the brutal attacks, and how she's quite a moral person and wouldn't resort to violence. So in order to link that to the play as a whole, we're thinking about her kind of sympathetic and moral side, and we're linking it to Lynette's wake. So it says throughout the play, Meggie's sympathetic and moral side can also be seen in Act 1, Scene 15, when Seffi shows up to Lynette's wake to pay her respects. Despite the ill treatment she has received from the Hadleys, particularly Jasmine, Seffi's mother, she decides to defend Seffi when Ryan and Jude are sharp and aggressive with her. When delivering the line, "The girl wasn't doing any harm, Ryan," I would begin by sighing to show how Meggie's disapproval of Ryan's immature behaviour. I would then use my vocal skills by emphasising the word harm to highlight the fact that Seffi is a young girl and wouldn't be capable of hurting anyone, showing Meggie is against violence. I would roll my eyes and shake my head to show Meggie's growing frustration with the tension between the families. This shows how moral Meggie is, but again her growing frustration. She has great strength of character for always being willing to be open to both noughts and crosses, but knows that inevitably there will always, that's meant to be a divide. So we're thinking about how Meggie, it links to that because she's quite moral and sympathetic with Seffi. Despite all that she's been through with the crosses and the Hadley family, she welcomes her with open arms. And she really has that disagreement with Ryan in that scene about how Seffi should be treated. And there's a very short kind of conclusion at the end just to round off the answer and make it kind of very clear. So now it's your go to have a go at one of the following questions. So it's looking at how you would interpret the characters as before. So we've got an example for Ryan and then Jasmine, and it gives you the extracts and the page numbers. So just flick through your copies of Noughts and Crosses to get to that. I would spend 25 minutes on this question. And a top tip is to make your own character maps for each character in the play. This is a really good way to get to grips with each character and make sure that you know exactly where you need to turn to in the exam. So good luck.